I said I would do a video, an update video, as these blackberries continue to ripen to show how much they're for sure producing, because when I first started growing blackberries, my big question, really when I grow anything in the garden, my big question is how much do I need? How much will these plants produce? So I have that for you today, exactly how much they produce. And if you can see, they are, look at this one is actually fully ripe. It's a dull color versus the bright shiny. You can see these, they really have like the shininess to them, whereas this one's a little bit more dull, not quite as shiny, and it may be easier to see in person. And these are still kind of purple, so these are not quite ripe, but by the end of the day they will be. That's how fast they ripen. So once they start turning and they get this brighter color red, that's it. It takes them about 24 to 48 hours to go from very bright red to black. And if you come out here, you'll see a couple of them that are kind of purplish. By evening time, they are black and ready to be picked. Now, I will pick them at this purple stage. Beware, they are very tangy and sour. I do not like sour food. But I do like making blackberry cobbler, or any kind of cobbler for that matter. And when you're making a cobbler or a pie and you're adding sweetener to it, it can get ridiculously sweet. So using berries that are a little underripe prevents two things. It prevents your foods that you're baking from being overly sweet when you're adding sugar or any kind of sweetener, but it also kind of helps manage the issues you may have with birds. For us, the only birds that we have sampling our berries is this mama mockingbird that always forms a nest in our tree, and she's there all the time. She's there pretty much year round, whether she has babies or not. And mockingbirds are so incredibly territorial that she just dive bombs. If it's our cat in the garden, if it's the dog, she does not attack the kids, which is crazy because their play area is right under the tree where she has her nest in, but she doesn't bother them. She's not bothered by the kids at all. But if she sees other birds anywhere near this garden, or even the neighbor's cats, things like that, wild cats, she will dive bomb them. I've even seen her like complaining and chirping and flying at my dog. So one of the neighbor's cats thought it would be clever and try to climb the tree. And I say neighbor's cat, what I mean is like neighborhood cat, because it does not belong to any of my immediate neighbors. But we have a pretty significant cat population here. And it thought it was going to climb the tree after some blue jays that were nesting, and that mockingbird just was relentless until it gave up and went away. So it's crazy. I don't mind it at all, but it's crazy to see like this little tiny bird protecting my entire garden from other larger birds and animals. And because of that, when she comes in and she samples our strawberries, like takes a strawberry or two, or eats half a berry, I don't worry. I just throw the rest of it to the geese and let it be, because I'm willing to sacrifice some of these blackberries and some of our strawberries to one mockingbird and her family versus to all of the birds that could possibly come in here. So it's an interesting form of pest control that I didn't really expect, but I see a lot of people that have permaculture gardens talk about bringing various species in to help control pests, whether it's insects, other birds, things like that. I've never seen it play out in action quite like that, so it's really cool to watch. Now, right here, I have 4 blackberry plants, and actually I have this one right here. That is our muscadine grapevine. It is taking over everything, and believe it or not, several times a day I have to come and kind of redirect it back this way, because it went from all the way over here, you know, taking over this whole fence line, trying to grow over my blackberries. So, and here's a good example of where it's attached on to the blackberries right here. So I think I've shown this before, but this is one blackberry plant right here. It's stretching out all the way down this fence. Now, this is not a vining variety of blackberry. It is not a bramble. It does not vine. It is a bush type, but these limbs will grow at a ridiculous rate of speed, and they will produce berries. There are berries way down here. Each one of these IBC frames is 4 feet wide, so that's over 8 feet right there, plus another 4 feet. So this one limb stretches well over 12 feet. It's probably like 16 feet total, because it goes all the way back to the main. You can just trim these off. I didn't get around to trimming it, and then it produced all of these berries, and I was like, I'm just going to let it be and see what happens. And it is a huge amount of berries. We'll probably get a quart and a half, maybe 2 quarts just out of this little section here. But if you really want some upright berries, just come in and trim it. You can trim them anytime. We cut them back pretty significantly, a lot of them during the winter. I made a little video where I was, you know, moving some of the canes, creating new plants that way, things of that nature. And then these are both have canes that are flora canes that produce on the second year canes, and those are these really woody canes. And then we have ones that produce on the green grow. So these berries are wonderful because if you live in a climate where you struggle with any kind of disease, you can literally come in here every winter and cut back all of these canes to the ground, and they will grow back in spring. But I cut down the ones that have flowered twice, because this one right here, this is new growth. This is all from this year. It's huge. And what happens is this will produce berries all the way through fall, and then next year it'll produce even more berries. So it'll produce the first and second year. And then these are second year canes right here. They're woody, they don't look as healthy or as pretty. And so this is the second crop of berries that it's producing. So earlier today I was kind of doing an update video on my blackberries, some of the things that I've learned, and the berry production. And then it was already so hot outside and I was in the sun that my phone completely shut down the camera and said that it was overheating, and so I just had to go inside and wait until evening time. During that time period I did come out and I picked over a pint, probably about a pint and a half of blueberries, which I was pretty excited about. So right now I have 2 quart bags full of berries in the freezer, and I'm pretty excited because that means that I can make some blackberry cobbler for our family, which I've really been looking forward to doing that. We all have, and we've kind of shared the berries with, you know, Mama Mockingbird, siblings coming over, my children, myself, my husband. So we had to make sure, you know, we all had our fill of berries. And once that kind of happened and the kids lost interest in coming over here and picking berries every day, they all kind of decided that they really wanted that cobbler more than anything. So it allowed me to save some. Now, if you have children that are eating blackberries every single day, or you are, it's going to be really hard to save it with just a few plants. So this is the second year that these berries have produced for us. The plants are between 3 and 4 years old. I want to say closer to 4. It's hard for me to guess because they're supposed to be about 1.5 to 2 years old when we got them from the store, and this is the second year growing them. So they've been growing for quite a while, and our production's pretty high because of that. But since I cut them back so far, I am not getting the full amount of production. I did cut them back a lot because they just grow wild, and disease does become an issue. Bugs and pests do become an issue here. And that's just something you really have to consider if you live in a hot, humid area. If you don't, you can probably leave the canes for next year pretty well. But I don't know, it just doesn't work for us. It gets too messy because they're growing 9 to 10 months out of the year. Only in the really cold, freezing weather do they even start to kind of change colors and lose their leaves. So humidity and pests definitely play a huge factor in this, even with it being a disease-resistant variety. So I know a large focus on this video really needs to be exactly how many berries are we getting per day per plant. And because we've cut them back so far, it is hard to say, especially with everyone coming out here eating them. But I can tell you that we're averaging about a pint a day for all 4 of these plants, and occasionally a berry or 2 from these plants. These haven't really produced as much, so I would say all 4 of these plants produce a pint a day easily, sometimes 2 pints. So that's about it, but I can tell you for sure in 4 days we got 2 full quart bags, and I mean like completely full, can barely close. The bags, they're freezer bags. So that's a pretty good. So I keep losing my train of thought and getting distracted by everything going on, but so in 4 days we've gotten 2 full quart bags. These are the freezer Ziploc bags of blackberries, and they're so full that I can barely close them, and people are still coming out here and eating them. And there are a couple that I've kind of thrown to the birds still, because the mama mockingbird has come and taken pretty substantial bites out of them and taken some of it back to her nest too. So that gives you a pretty good idea of what we're getting. And like I said, this is my second full year growing these plants. So they're between 3 and 4 years old, because they were already between 1 and 2 years old whenever we got them from the nursery. They're supposed to be closer to 2. That's why I said they were more like 18 months to 2 years. But honestly, just because it says that doesn't mean it's necessarily true. And I don't know personally. So I'm just kind of giving a broad timeline there for exactly how old they may be. So I would say for growing for this long and how much I cut them back in winter, we're getting a pretty substantial amount of fruit, and I'm pretty pleased about that. If you're a smaller household, you probably don't need 8 plants, but for us and what we want to do and eventually make jams and jellies and everything else, honestly, I think we're going to need quite a few more plants. There are 6 of us, and that doesn't include extended family that comes over regularly. So I would say we're gonna need at least 20 plants. We need a lot more plants in full production. And I need something to trellis this grapevine on, because it is just taking over everything in such a short period of time. And look, there's there's squash bugs right in here, breeding yuck, right in my muscadine. Gross. They do emit like the worst smell, so smush them, remove them. Your hands are gonna smell terrible. I can smell it. I need to wash my hands, but it doesn't matter. They're not hiding in this vine, creating disease and going to my other plants, which is great. Look at this. So I have to come down here regularly and kind of train it along this fencing, which if you don't know is just IBC fencing. I don't know if in the future I'll want to grow muscadines where I have all my blackberries. I didn't realize just how much they would trail off. This is insane. So I guess that's about it for the production of the berries. I would say for, you see the average family of 4, which we're not. 8 plants might work for you if you're just looking for maybe fresh eating, but I really think for my family, which is a family of 6, just for fresh eating, I probably need 12 plus plants. For canning and everything else, we definitely don't have enough. I am looking at areas where I can shove more blackberries and grow them as companion plants along fencing, everything. I definitely think, even though right now we're in an area that it's a small town really, but consider a city, it has some pretty strict rules. The city really acts more like an HOA as far as some of the things that we're allowed to do. I do think that in the future we're going to have to expand and get a larger property in order to really grow what we need for our family and be able to put food back on a larger scale. But for now, I'm pretty excited to be doing what we're doing. And also, we managed to harvest, on top of some of those berries, 6 squash today, which filled an entire quart bag and half of another. So that's a pretty good amount of squash, and there are a ton left to grow, which you can see kind of growing down here. So when you start growing other stuff like squash, and we have all this lettuce growing, and we have cucumbers that are growing but they haven't produced any fruit yet, things like that. And then you can see these are watermelon plants growing inside of here. So they're just babies, but they'll take over as we harvest this lettuce. Growing all of these together is going to make a huge difference and really expand our harvest. So we're not just focusing on the berries and everything else. We're really kind of focusing on everything. And then, although we want to produce more fruit, it's really just kind of supplementing our diet. As time goes on and we add more plants, then I think it will become a larger staple of our diet. We do really like fruit. Right now we're really dependent on fruit from the grocery stores, including apples, oranges, still buying blueberries, even though we have some blueberry plants. They're just not really producing that much. You know, if these weren't producing so well this year, we'd still be buying blackberries. Up until, I would say, about February, we were still buying blackberries from the store. We do buy raspberries, so that's something to really consider and think about. Just how much you need to grow and how much of your yard you're willing to give up to do so. You know, there are things that instead of doing certain things, setting up different areas in our yard, we choose to use it for food production. We also choose to grow food as beautification plants instead of plants that are usually used to be pretty, and make sure that things are multifunctional as much as possible. So I would say on average about half a pint to a full pint a day per blackberry plant is what these Arkansas Traveler blackberries are producing. These can produce from 10 to 15 years, so I imagine, especially if you leave these prima canes up to become flora canes and then next year's canes, instead of cutting them down to the ground like I did and cutting a significant amount off, that you could probably easily get half a quart, maybe even more, from these plants as time progresses. You could potentially even get a full quart if your plant is old enough, healthy enough, and has enough canes. So that is really cool. But I would definitely say safely a pint is what's to be expected in a really healthy plant. Now, if you cut that plant back to the ground, I would say don't expect more than half a pint a day, which is still a pretty great amount when you think about it, because these plants will continue producing until the first hard freeze comes, and then as soon as the ground thaws and it gets around 50 to 60 degrees, they will already be growing again, which is really cool. And if you're in an area like us where you don't really get a lot of hard freezes, they will grow pretty much 10 months out of the year. I would say if you're in a warmer zone and you rarely see temperatures dip below 40, you are definitely going to have berries probably year round. And they grow well in the heat, and they grow well even in cool weather. So this is an excellent plant. I will never stop bragging on these Thornless Blackberries. They're one of my absolute favorites. I like to just call them Arkansas Traveler. We do have a couple of Freedom Berries, which are basically the same plant, to be real honest. But you also see them called Prime Arc berries, because that's kind of Prime Arc is kind of the I can't even think of it right now. So that's kind of, I guess, like the brand for them. You know, that's what the patent's under, basically. So the patent for these berries, copyright, whatever you want to call it, has them under Prime Arc. So if you see those Prime and then it says ARK with an @ symbol in front of it, that that is these berries, the Arkansas Travelers, and even you may see Prime Arc Freedom Berry, which is the sister plant to these. And honestly, I have one or two of the Freedom Berries. I cannot tell the difference. Some have suggested it could be storage and everything else, but honestly, I can't tell. They're all pretty decent size. If I had to guess, maybe berry size has something to do with it too. But that's something I've even tried researching and I couldn't really figure it out, to be perfectly honest. So if you guys know more about it, let me know. Or if you've researched it better than I have, you know, let me know there too. But I really like these plants. So I hope that kind of helps you out if you're wondering exactly how many plants you need for your family and what they have the potential to produce. Now, I need you to understand that I have these amended very well. I use acidifier, micro-life acidifier in my soil. I also add mushroom compost every year. So these are very well attended to. I'm not just planting them in clay soil and leaving them. If you did that, or any kind of soil that's hasn't been amended or have the right nutrients or pH level, you're definitely going to get a significantly lower production rate, a lot less fruit than we're getting, and that's just something to consider. So I'm going to get off of here. I'm definitely going to have to edit this and string a few videos together because I kept losing my train of thought, and when my camera overheated earlier, I definitely could not remember even where I was going with what I was saying, what my train of thought was, or anything. So if it gets a little confusing in areas, I do apologize. Trust me, sometimes when there's a lot going on and I have to shoot a video over a period of time, I am also getting very, very confused. And look, you can see as the evening progresses, some of these other berries are finally starting to ripen too, which is really cool. So thank you guys for hanging out with me, and I hope this helps you out on your berry growing journey.